If not, maybe some of because for me, research is a daily life. You do conduct research in your daily life, whether you realize or not. Whether the difference between basic research and educational research or systematic research is that the research that you conduct in master level or PhD level is we are using a systematic approach. Okay, so what do I mean by systematic? Then you all will go through with all the modules that being provided or prepared by Center for Graduate Studies. I believe that there are somewhere around 6 or 8 modules that you need to go through. So this is the first module. So this is kind of the introduction. So the rest, I believe that you will go through with the other section, whereby next module will be on literature review, and then maybe the other module will be the research design or the methodology itself, and then the data analysis and so on. So in this section, is kind of a very brief introduction, but even though it's brief, some terms that you need to, there is some terms that you need to understand or clearly understand before you proceed with your research or your interest of topic. So allow me to share my slide. Okay, so I will provide you this slide later, but I'm open for the, if you have questions, please do stop me during my presentation. You don't have to wait until the end, because I'm not expecting to finish this class at 5. I'm expecting to finish this class much earlier, because I have another class at 5 p.m. So I'm expecting to finish this class no later by 4:30. Okay. All right. I hope you can see my slide. Can you see it? All right. I don't want to use a slide mode because I'm afraid that it doesn't work. So I just use the original file. I just zoom it a little bit in order for you to get a clear notes on the what the slide tried to mention. Okay, so this is the slide that I made just for the brief introduction for the research methodology and overview. So again, my name is Badarudin Ibrahim, and I am from the Faculty of Technical Vocational Education. And from the list that I have, I saw there are maybe somewhere around 5 to 8 students enrolled in FPTV. So perhaps maybe later on we will meet. You will meet me in other session. Okay, hopefully. And the rest, I hope you see. I'm hoping to see around in the campus. Okay, so the next slide is this presentation or this session is just want to briefly explain what this research is all about and the importance of the research, why we conduct research or why we need to conduct research, and the basic 6 steps in research process, okay, and then purpose of research, and then lastly, of course, since I'm from the FPTV, of course, I want to stress out why we need to conduct research in GVET. Bear in mind, I'm open to share or to discuss with other social sciences topic, whereby if you have your own topic, I'm happy to hear it from you. And perhaps maybe we can discuss further or details in this class or in other session. So the next slide, we move on to the what is research is all about. So other than textbook that Center of Graduate prefer we all to use, my preference always refer to textbook from Creswell. So what Creswell mentioned about research is that research is a process of steps used to collect and analyze information to increase our understanding of a topic or issues. So by having that terms or by having that definition, what do we mean by systematic is that there are some steps that we have to follow in order for us to get the right information to produce or to interpret in a proper way in order to get the better understanding of the community. Because the big reason or the one big reason why we conduct research is to solve problems or to look for the answer of an issue. Okay, we are not trying to solve the world problem. Okay, so there must be a specific issue. That is the challenges lah for the novice researcher to get what we call as specific issues, to identify the specific issues. So what I mean by the specific issues is that you must be clear what are the issues is all about and what are the variables behind the issues that influence or that will affect the final findings or final result and so on. So generally, when we talk about why we conduct research is trying to solve a problem, then generally the research process consists of these three steps. First, we need to pose a question. So by having this question will guide us how we're going to answer these questions. Because this is the unique of research. You create the question in order for you to answer, not for others to answer. Okay, to create the question for you to answer. Or an other way that we define the question is question will guide you. Okay, question that you develop will guide you throughout the research. And then the research process also consists of the process of gathering the data, collecting the data to answer the question. So basically, there are two approach that basically student or researcher will use. They can collect the data by using a qualitative approach, whereby they will have a session of interviews with the respondent. The other way is using the quantitative approach, whereby they gather the data by conducting surveys, conducting the tests, or in other words, is numerical numbers. They collect numbers. And then the third one also most of the students use, especially in postgraduate level, PhD level, is a mixed method. A combination between quantitative and qualitative approach. So that is the process of the collecting the data is considered as one big process of research. And then finally, of course, students have to answer the questions and disseminate or present the findings to the audience. So what I can conclude from this slide is that research is one of the things that we use to solve problems or look for answers. And also research is for sharing, meaning that the final points from the three major process in research is whereby you need to disseminate or present. Dissemination or presentation is just, it doesn't mean that you just make a slide and then present. It also can be any other ways, like you publish a papers, you publish your findings, okay, and then you do go for the forum or seminar whereby you share your research with other of your colleagues or with your new partners, for example. So that is also called a dissemination. So next, this is about the educational research. Also can be reflected to the social science research. Is the systematic way of obtaining and analyzing information in order to solve problems related to education discipline. So the outcome of research is a new knowledge. So same goes to all social science research or even science and technology research. As I mentioned earlier, this session is that why we conduct research is try to solve problem or looking for answers. And when we focus on education or when we focus on social science, meaning that we try to solve problem related to our community, our social life. So in the case of education, of course, we try to solve problem related to education discipline. The other word that sometimes I much prefer use terms issues rather than problems, because problems, some might say, is a negative words. So when we talk about issues, when we use term issues, so maybe it's more professionals rather than we use term problems. So either way, same goal is trying to reach one solution or come up with a recommendation on how we're going to solve that issues or problems related to, as mentioned in the slides, education or in other social or community issues. And the outcome, of course, is a new knowledge or new findings, or maybe to confirm the theory, for example, not necessarily a new knowledge, but also it can be a confirmation of the theory, for example, okay, also can be the outcome. If you have a question, please stop me. If not, see the slide. Okay. All right. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, so why we conduct research and why research is important. Okay. Of course, some might say that, okay, research adds to our knowledge. When we conduct research, we first address problems and issues and search for possible solutions. Through research, we find answers to questions, giving us a better understanding of the problems. And the second one is research is improvise or improve practice. This is also important because it's just improvement for practice, right? Through research, we can make recommendation or improvement to existing condition, as I mentioned earlier. Okay, so this is big why. This is two big why we conduct research. Okay, so one of the things that I really encourage novice researcher, especially on master level or PhD level student, is that you must have I'm use this term passion in conducting or in your topics. Okay, so that's why most of the supervisors, I believe that you all have you already assigned your supervisor. Okay, and most of the supervisor, I'm sharing based on my experience. Okay, sorry if maybe is the opposite what you have experienced, but what I experienced is that most of the supervisor usually don't come with his or her research topic for his or her students. The student will come with their own research topic and then discuss with the supervisor whether this topic is researchable or practical to be studied or so on. And from that point, the discussion evolved. Okay, it can be both sides adding a new knowledge, proving a theory, for example, or improve practice. Okay, so that's why I hope that most of you have, come up with an idea of your topics, because if you don't, perhaps it's not too late. It is still not too late because this is your first semester. So hopefully that you all have one topic stack in mind. And then at the beginning, my advice is that at the beginning, for your research journey in identifying topics that I'm going to show you in the next slide or in the next few slides, is that you must have this kind of, identify the issues, and then the issues must be significant, or problem must be significant. Okay, that's why how are we going to make sure that your research or your topic is significant? So perhaps maybe some of you have heard from your seniors or from those who have experience conducting a PhD or graduate from the PhD or master level, is that most of the supervisor or most of the examiner, when come to the writing parts, okay, they all comment about your citation, your references. Okay, so your citation and your references must within time frame 5 years. So for example, if now is 2026, so your reference must be not being too old than 2021, for example. So if you have reference or your issues, most of your reference for the issues is cited, or your reference is based on 2015, 2018, then the examiner will question you whether this research is still significant or not. So be careful on that. So my advice is that advice is that you need to come out with your proper reference citation to address the issues, and then make sure that your references is no later than within 5 years time frame. Okay, and then make sure also you have the access to the reference. Okay, so don't just assuming. This is one that I think that most students love to do, assume. So in educational research, when we talk about systematic research, okay, at the beginning, yes, you can assume. Throughout the journey, no, you need to find evidence. You need to justify, you need to answer, or you need to justify your issues. You need to find the supporting document that can support your issues, that convince to the audience. Your first audience is your examiner, remember. Your first audience is your examiner. You need to convince your examiner why your research is important. Okay. So the next continue, and then of course, finally is the research will inform the policymakers inform the policy debates. Other than the first 2 points that I mentioned in the previous slide related to the knowledge and the what we call it as a practice. Okay, of course, the third one is about the policy. So this is important. We conduct research to inform policymakers, to inform the governments, to inform the institution, to inform our superior. Okay, that this is what happened in the ground, for example. That's why when we talk about education, when we talk about community, or we talk about social science, we want to make some, or when we want to introduce new policies or new policies or rules, for example, then the policy or rules must come from the ground, or from the what really happened in the ground. Okay, inputs from the ground, input from the stakeholders, for example. And then, for example, when we want to introduce new policy or new rules in education, for example, so what are the input or stakeholder? What we're going to have input from the ground? Okay. For example, right now, perhaps maybe all of you, since you are Malaysian, maybe from the international, I will just introduce that we have in Malaysia, we have these new policies that our kindergarten start at year 6 or year 5, for example, and the primary or our primary schools start at the age of 6, for example. So this is the big policy or the big changes that being made by our government. And then before our government come into this kind of policy, or before our government come to this kind of new rules in education, I believe that they have conduct this kind of research. They have conduct this kind of, gathered all the information from the stakeholders, from the parents, from the schools, from the industries, and so on. Because the thing is, this is why the research is important. Okay, because research is trying to give some information or insight for the policy or for the policymaker, in order for them to review or revisit the current policy or the current rules or act that maybe need to be revisited. Okay. So next is the 6 steps in research process. So this is a big 6 steps of the research process. And these big 6 steps that I believe that you're all going to gone through in this research methodology class. Okay, my part is just a brief introduction, whereby maybe I will touch some of the problem identification and so on. But then again, the rest, maybe because next session will be on literature review, and the following session might be on methodology. Okay, the next session will be on data collection and so on. Okay, so this is the big 6 step, common big step any research will go through. As I mentioned, first, of course, you need to have the problems, or other words, you need to have the issues. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, in order for you to justify your issue or justify your problems, you must make sure that your issue or your problem is significant. Okay. What I mean by significant is relevant to the context, okay, relevant to the population of your studies, Okay, relevant to the, scenario or current scenario. I mentioned earlier, context. Okay, so you cannot study something that is not happening. Okay, so then if it is not happening, so there should be no issues, right? Because the problem does not exist. So once the problem doesn't exist, so the issue is not there. So this is the thing that you need to. For me, I always ask my students, you must ask yourself why, and why. Okay, why I conduct this topic, why I'm using this, why I'm using this, why I'm studying this issue, why I'm use or locate my study in some areas, why I'm studying this group or this student or this school, for example. Why? Ask yourself why, because by having that, for me, why question, you motivate yourself to seek for the answers. Seek for the answer through literature, because that is the beginning of the or the easiest way on justifying your problems. Okay. Next, we're going to have the literature review, whereby, as I mentioned, when you identify the problem, once you realize or once you clear about your issues, problem, and so on, then you need to conduct the literature review, whereby in this stage, the literature review you have to conduct intensively the literature review related to that particular topics. Okay, that's why I'm considering that in this section or in this literature review process, you will be, I would say that will be the master of the topic. Okay, that's why in the literature review, sometimes you need to look back at the history, even though the history is in 1960 or 1950s. Then you need to understand the history of the philosophy before you can come up with the new trend and so on. Okay, because I'm always use this simple analogy, okay, to my former student. Okay, we talk about when we have COVID-19 last 2019, for example, right? So all schools around the world are closed, and we have to conduct our class through online, for example. And then since then, the online learning or the online philosophy start to grow very, very fast, very, very rapid. Okay, but actually, the online learning is not start or begin in 2019, right? So actually, the online learning, the study or research about the online learning, the good thing about online learning, the researcher acknowledged the good thing of online learning, realized since 2010 or early 2000. But then again, most of the schools, most of the teachers, most of the lecturers in the university kind of ignore this approach. Because why? Because still they believe that the traditional, conventional approach is still beneficial to the student. I'm not denying, because I'm the lecturer, I'm the teacher, so I'm not denying that. But then again, when times goes on, we need to acknowledge the changes. We need to move with the technologies. So what happened is that in 2019, when COVID come in, whether you like it or not, you have to change. Right? You have to change. Whether you like it or not, you have to change. Because there is no, it's almost impossible at that time to conduct class face-to-face. Okay? Because all schools, all movement is grounded, for example. They're not simply get out from your house or go to school as before. Then whether you like it, you need to change. So that's why the involvement or the establishment of online learning growth, and as I mentioned, people like it or not, need to adapt with the changes. Okay. So in order to understand that, you need to conduct the intensive literature review. What are the issues behind the online learning, for example? Okay, after you identify the problems. All right. And then, of course, you need to justify your research, okay? And then by having, once you have conduct your literature review, I believe that you have answers, or you can find answer for why you conduct this research. Okay. And followed by the data collection. Okay, so the data collection must be synchronized with your research questions or research objective. Okay, this is the hint that we're going to explore in this class. Okay, and then the next is the analyzing the data. Okay, analyzing data is one thing, but the most important thing is that to interpret the data. Okay, some students can, master in data analysis, but the most important thing is that it's not about analyzing. And yeah, I'm not saying that data analysis is not important. Yes, it's very important. But once you have this data, you need to interpret it in a proper right way. Okay. For example, in statistics, for example, okay, most of the students prefer to use mean and standard deviation to present the data. But believe me, not all data can be presented in mean or using mean. Okay. For example, okay, if you're collecting data about gender, male and female, out of 200 respondents, for example, okay, maybe you have 115 men and 85 women, for example. So if, let's say, throughout that, okay, male 1, female 2, for example, in your scoring sheet, okay, so then the average will be 1.5 or 1.8. So what does 1.8 means for the gender? It's nothing, right? So what is the best way to present gender? What are the data? What is statistical approach that suitable to present gender? It's not mean, because gender have only two, male or female. Okay, so the best way is using frequency. Okay, so that's why don't get trapped in this kind of analysis. Okay, so yeah, for me, that's why knowledge is important. Okay, then once you know, you have to practice. Okay, so that's why I mentioned earlier on, data analysis is important, but most important thing is how you're going to interpret the data. I give you an example. Okay, and of course, finally is your reporting and the evaluation process. So the evaluation process for PhD or Masters by Research is going through, you must pass the Viva portion. Okay, and I believe other than that, in order for you to complete your PhD, I just want to mention earlier here, okay, for those who are conducting Masters by Research or PhD by Research, the requirement for graduation is important. You need to understand. You need to know early on. Okay, the requirement for graduation is one of it is publication, not only your thesis. One thesis is one part. Once you settle your thesis, there are other requirements. Is your publication. Okay, so please refer to the updated version of rules and regulation from CGS about the numbers of publication that you have to publish before you can graduate. Okay, so that one you need to be checked. All right. Okay, this is kind of the again process explanation again. Okay, as I mentioned early on. Okay, so the 6 steps. So identifying the research problem. So again, every research begin with the issues. Okay. For example, social media is inhibiting verbal communication among youth. Teenage smoking will lead to more premature death. So this is kind of the sample of an issue. Okay. But again, okay, in order for you to justify this issue, then you need to look through literature. What literature or what previous research say about the social media? What the literature reviews say about smoking teenagers? Okay, so this is important for you to study. That's why the second steps, reviewing the literature, is crucial. Okay, you cannot touch only a surface of your topic. You need to go deep in your topic. Okay, and then when you review the literature, okay, so the literature entail locating summaries, including books, journals, and index publication on topic, selectively choosing the literature to include in your review, synthesizing the literature and summarizing the literature into a written report. So this is one of the major skills. Okay, literature review is not a copy and paste method. Okay, because I've been reviewed so many theses. Luckily, it's only at the proposal stage. I can understand, but sometimes I'm also triggered that copy and paste mode in the Viva voucher station. So this, for me, is unacceptable. Okay, because literature review is not a copy and paste. You just copy from the article and paste in your thesis. No, you need to conduct synthesizing of your literature, synthesize your reading. Okay, you must have critics or providing opinion on the literature, something like that. So it's a process of you to learn on writing a literature. Okay, and then the third step is the specify a process, a purpose for the research. Okay, so this is kind of the problems to narrow down exactly what the research intend to study. Okay, so you need to formulate. This is what I call a research formula. So why you want to formulate your research by having this, what we call as a purpose statement, or in other words, problem statement. Okay. And then move on to the data collection process. As I mentioned early on, the data collection we can have using survey or quantitative approach. You can have interviews using qualitative approach, or maybe you can a mixed method approach. So either approach that you use for your research, again, ask yourself why I'm using this approach, why I'm using quantitative, why I'm using qualitative, why I'm using this method. You need to ask yourself, because believe me, at some point, if you don't ask yourself, external or examiner will ask you same question. Trust me. Okay, so you need to be as critical enough when you want to conduct your study. Okay, be critical. Why? Ask yourself, why I need to do this? Why I have to read this? Why I need to find the literature? Why I need to go for the school? Why I need to go for the fieldwork? Why? Ask yourself why. Just for you to justify or make yourself comfortable with the topics. Okay, and trust me, don't assume. This one is one of the things that student or novice researcher like to do, assume. So the external or examiner will not ask this question. Assume, oh, this is not important. Or assume this respondent is suitable. Assume this method is okay. Assume your supervisor is okay. No, you need to change that mode of assuming into justifying. Okay, and of course, the fifth step is analyzing and interpreting. As I mentioned earlier, okay, the importance of data analysis is same important as interpreting the data. Okay, and then when you interpret the data, okay, also when you come into this session I hope that the lecturers for that particular session will expose you to some of the samples of data presentation, whereby data can be presented using table, figures, and pictures. Okay, summarize the result, and bear in mind, okay, thesis is different. Writing a thesis is different from writing storybooks. Okay, writing thesis, point from the thesis can be repetitive, but too much repetitive can be annoying. Remember that. Okay, so even though you've been allowed to replicate points from chapter 4 into chapter 5 or chapter 2 into chapter 5 and so on, which I mean repetitive, but you must make sure that your repetitive points is significant enough for you to use and reuse it again. Okay, just don't be repetitive just for the sake of, oh, I like this point. No. Okay, you must have reason or justification on why you think that by repeating this statement will help audience to understand your findings. So that is very important. Okay, and lastly, of course, reporting and evaluating research. As I mentioned, this is the stage of dissemination and examination. Okay, disseminate your research, okay, in other ways, okay. Dissemination, as I mentioned early on, okay, can be in terms of presentation, can be in terms of publication, okay, can be in terms of attending seminars and something like that, okay. So as I mentioned early on, okay, one of the points that why we conduct research is to share, okay. So if you think you want to conduct research and keep yourself, that is not research. Okay, that is for me considering as a personal diary. You conduct research and then keep yourself. It's kind of create your own diary. Okay, no one can read, so no one can understand the issue. No one can understand the findings. No one can understand. Then it's kind of the diary. So bear in mind, that's why the hardest part of research is, okay, to convince others or your audience the significance of your findings, because this will have I mean, all those steps or all the 6 steps that have been explained previously have their own challenges. I'm not saying that when I'm saying that this is the hardest part, I'm not saying that this is the only hardest part. All steps, all 6 steps in the research process have their own challenges, have their own issues. Okay, but then again, at the end, okay, at the end, as I mentioned in previous slide, I believe it's slide 3, is that why you conduct research? To convince your policy, right? The third point, to convince the policymaker. That is your audience. So yeah, I mean, if your research is significant enough, if your research is relevant enough, up to the trend, up to the date, for example, then your research can be useful for the policymakers. If not, then the research or the audience will argue you. So that's why the most important thing is that you have to justify or being able to share your research as soon as possible, not until the end. For example, you have 3 years in your PhD journey, or master journey might have 1.5 years, for example. You need to share your topics or your passion of your topic or writing something related to your topic as soon as possible. And disseminate, I mean share, not only with your supervisor, and sometimes you need to share with your peers, your friends, okay? And a good friends always say, why you conduct this research? Huh? Why you have this one? Why not that? Why not this? For example, okay? For me, that is a good friend. That is the friend that you need to look for. But if your friends say, oh, you're good, your topic is very good, nice, okay, easy, then that one, you need to be careful, because it is not helpful. As I mentioned, you need to be critical. It's not saying that, I mean, I say critical, it's not a bad thing, but I mean, you need to be critical about the topics. So you need to find someone that can help you to understand more about the issues, not someone that go too easy with you. So, I mean, I'm not saying that you don't have to make friends with him or them, but then again, okay, to make sure that you understand, you have a very clear picture of your issue or topic, you need to be surrounded by people that kind of argue your topics or argue your research. Okay. All right. So this is the purpose of research. Okay. There are many reasons why we conduct research. Okay. So some is just to explore. Some might want just to make a description. Okay. Some might have to explain. So these two different things, explore and explain. Okay. And then some might want to make or do some action or make some changes or intervention. Okay. Some might want to evaluate the process or so on. So this is some of the example of why we conduct research. Okay. So yeah, as I mentioned, since I'm from education background, so that's why most of the points that I highlight in this slide is more maybe some of related to technical vocational education, but again, it's about the education. So I believe in other social science field also can use this sample as an example for your topics. Okay. All right. So, I mean, this is just a simple slide in terms of why we conduct research. Okay. Same to other social science approach. As I mentioned earlier on, it's kind of very repetitive. So I don't think that I want to discuss it details or discuss it further. Maybe you can read throughout the slides. Okay. And then this is the difference lah. I just want to make what we call as the try to differentiate the level of research between bachelor degree, master of science, or PhD. So in bachelor degree, maybe you learn about methodology of how doing research. In master level, you need to solve problem using the methodology that you have learned. Meanwhile, when you do a PhD, as what we have discussed before, PhD or research tend to generate new knowledge. For example, okay, then in order to achieve that goal, you will use methodology you learn and the experience of solving problem to produce something. So this is 3 different level scope of research, and perhaps you by having this kind of basic information, you will know how to differentiate between whether this can be a master level or it can be a PhD level, since this class is only for master and PhD level. Okay. So in this next 2 slides is just about the sample structure of the research proposal. So as I mentioned, or maybe I can mention here, is that as a UTHM postgraduate student, I would advise you to go through and look through the postgraduate thesis writing format at beginning stage as soon as possible. Okay, don't look it later. You as a student, you need to be proactive enough. Okay, go to the CGS website and then go to the download menu, I believe, and then look for the thesis writing format, UTHM thesis writing format. So download the document. You don't have to buy. Okay, download the document, read through. Okay, understand and discuss with your supervisor. So what I just shared here in my slide maybe is still relevant, or maybe there are some changes. Okay, so that's why I'm saying that you need to go through that thoroughly and then refer back to your supervisors. Okay, for example, for the title, okay, make sure that the title, this one title should be at the end lah. Okay, normally if you have, you need to have the title, of course. But then again, the title of the thesis can be changed so many times. So I mean, it's good for you to have the initial title. But in order for you to design the title, the guideline is that short, brief, and straightforward. Maximum 3 lines or ideal 15 words. Okay, and then minimize the personal name. So personal name is not allowed in the title actually. Okay, and then this is the content for the chapter 1, for example, you need to have the introduction, okay? And then you need to have the background of the research, statement of the problem, purpose, objective of the research questions, research scope, conceptual framework, significance of research, definition of terms. So this is the kind of structure that I believe 9 considered must have in the writing for chapter 1. Must have, okay? It can be more, but this is kind of 9 minimum must have, okay? And then go to the chapter 2, okay? So the chapter 2, this chapter 2 literature review is kind of open-ended section. You can have, there is no one right formula how many subheadings that you need to have in your chapter 2. There's no one right formula. Okay, you can have 10 subsection. You can have 5 subsection. It's up to you. Depend on the topics. Okay. But then again, always remember, literature review is not a copy and paste mode. Okay, it's not. There's no such rule. The thicker, the better. There is no such rule on that. Okay. The most important thing on your literature review is your synthesizing of the information, summarizing of the information. That is the most important thing in your literature review. And of course, the synthesizing and the literature must relate to your topic of your research. Okay. And then chapter 3 is your research methodology. Of course, again, there are 8 or 9 subheadings. Again, this is considered as must have, okay, in your writing, which is include introduction, your research design, your population and sampling, research instrument, research procedure, data collection, data analysis, research ethic, expected outcome. Okay, expected outcome. Okay, this kind of subjective. Yes, in the proposal, you must have the expected outcome because it's still the proposal stage. Okay, when you finish your study, when you finish your data collection, when you draft your final draft, then this expected outcome section must be removed. There is no more expected outcome because already done. You need to understand that. Okay, it's saying when you say expected outcome is what you expect. Expect it in your proposal stage, right? So once it's done, or your research is done, your writing is done, then the expected outcome must be removed. Okay, and then move to chapter 4, your data analysis. Okay, again. There is no such one rules, okay? How many headings or how many subheadings should have in the chapter 4. But my simple formula is that chapter 4 is result or research findings, okay? Should reflect your research questions or research objective. If you have 4 research question or 4 objective, for example, then the minimum headings that you must have in the chapter 4 is 4 subheading, excluding introduction and summary. Okay, so it's really depend on the context of your research, especially when you want to present your result. Same goes to the conclusion and implication. Okay, so this is kind of the guideline that guide you on how you're going to structure your chapter 5. But when you want to discuss your findings or summarize your research, I would suggest you to summarize or discuss your findings based on your research objective or research questions. Okay. And then last but not least, course, the reference and appendix. Okay, so that is for slide 1. We have 2 slides. So this slide is more related to the choosing your topic for your research. This is just a guideline on how you're going to choose your topic. And again, perhaps right now, of course, because I believe that in your application, you already have your topics that you propose in your before you can submit your form. And of course, perhaps maybe you have already discussed your topic with your supervisor. But again, allow me to just share this slide just for you to maybe have some thought on whether your topics is again relevant, significant, or researchable for your study. All right. So again, the outline of this research is that just guide you on how or where is the potential source that you're going to look or read in order for you to achieve or to have this kind of topics or for your research. And then the characteristic of a good topics. So when you say a good topic, so what are the criteria that hold that good topics? And then some criteria for topic selection, okay? And then narrow down topic. So again, you must differentiate between topics and title. So topic is a broad, general, or maybe the broad idea of the subject that you're going to study. Title is already narrowing down or specific about the topic. So that's why in most of my slides, I'm not using terms title, research title or research title. We use the terms research topics. Okay, like I'm show you, for example, in the previous slide, I give you an example about online learning. So online learning is a topic. Okay, it's not a title yet. So you have interest in online learning, good. What you are going to study on what? All right, on online learning. So you explore the topics online learning in your web base. Okay, so you study about what are the issues related to online learning. Okay, back in 5 years, as I mentioned, so your reference must have within 5 years time frame. So what are the recent issues related to online learning, for example? Okay. So while you come across the online learning, you trigger one new terms, for example, okay, gamification. Come up with this new term, gamification. Even though it's not online learning, it's gamification. Okay. It's about technology. It's not online learning, it's about technology, gamification. So this is where you will reach this phase whereby you getting confused. Okay, getting confused whether I want to study about the online learning or I want to study about gamification. Okay, so you get confused. And because originally you interest on online learning, but when you read through within 5 years literature, you come across these new terms or this kind of, or you new terms about gamification, for example. So, and then a lot of research about gamification recently, okay? Then you have to decide. There is no one right solution. Again, right? That's why I always advise you to ask yourself why I want to study e-learning. If you want to change gamification, why I want to change to gamification. You must justify within yourself. Okay. Then, because why I'm advising you that, because people or examiner will ask the same question. Trust me. Why you conduct this study? Why you conduct your study in this school? Why you pick this location? That is kind of question, basic question that, I mean, examiners or your audience generally, okay, will ask you. Okay. That's why the next point, when you narrowing down your topic, is crucial. Okay. And then I will end up with the activity, okay, whereby this activity I hope is considered as the assignment for this session. And this activity you need to submit through author. So I believe in the groups I saw that the coordinator, Dr. Hayati, or maybe some of his colleagues already post asking if you have already access to author. If don't, please give information to CGS in order for you to get access to author. Okay, in order for you to have access to the materials and also have access to submit your assignment. Because remember, each module have their own assignment. So this is considered as my module assignment, my assignment. So if you have 8 or 6 or 8 modules, so you have basically 6 to 8 assignments. So in order for you to pass this class, you need to submit or pass the assignment. Okay, so the due date for the assignment, of course, will be at the end of this total research methodology class lah. The sooner you submit, the better. Okay, so that is my advice. Okay, next we go to the where to look the topics. Okay, of course, when you have topics, basically, generally, I believe is from your professional or personal interest. What exists and energizes you? What career goals could be enhanced by studying a particular topics? Okay, this is for me. If you have this kind of interest for that particular topics, okay, that your interest will be your internal motivation to drive you to finish your journey. Okay. Research, whether master or PhD, is a journey. Okay. You can enter the class, for example, this 17 or 15 students in this class. You can enter the program same date, same time, but not everyone will finish at the same time. That's what I call a journey. Okay. You can go from Batu Pahat to Kuala Lumpur. The fastest way is using the highway, plus highway. You can reach Kuala Lumpur within 3 hours. Okay. Also, you can go to Kuala Lumpur using the federal roads, all right, which may take you more than 5 or 6 hours. Go to Muar, Melaka, Seremban, and so on. Maybe 5 to 6 hours. Also, you reach your destination, right? You also reach your destination. Okay, and some might have a long journey, longer journey than that. Meaning that, oh, I need to go to Kuantan first before I reach Kuala Lumpur. So he go from Batu Pahat to Kuantan, okay, and then go down back through Karak Highway through KL, which may take more than 12 hours. This is the journey that I mentioned. Okay, so that's why hopefully that this motivation or interest can motivate you which road you're going to take. Are you going to take the fastest road? Are you going to take the federal road? Or whether you're going to take the, I mean, like I mentioned, go to Kuantan and then turn back to Kuala Lumpur? So it's your choice. Okay. And then the second point is from your faculty members, from your peers, from your professional colleague. This, when you identify the topics, and fellow students, listen to their suggestions about the potential topics. This is one of the things. Okay? But again, you can have this kind of insight, or you can have this kind of, approach. But then again, you must have patience. Okay. That's why when people or when students ask me whether you have the good or bad topics, it's hard for me to say. It's hard for me to answer that, because for me, there is no such good or bad topics. Okay? It's how you justify your topics. Okay? As I mentioned earlier, I'm using the same example, online learning. Okay? Why online learning, right? Or pre-COVID and post-COVID online learning is different, right? Even though online learning is, has been introduced in early 20s, for example, but the full implementation only can be implemented after COVID-19 or after 2020, for example, right? But again, if you don't have patience, if you are not technology guy, right? Allergic to the computer or never use the computer for assignment using the typewriter, prefer to writing in hand, or if you're using computer only using the basic, software, for example, then it's hard for you to digest this kind of online learning. It's new for you, right? So you need to learn. So again, there is no such good or bad topic. It's on how you justify your topics. And then the third one is, of course, from professional journals in your field, your journey. This is where you can find out the hot topics and issues. Okay. Journals mean it can be your personal diary, can be from literature, okay, and then the best is from the literature, okay, easy for you to defend or justify your research, okay. And then, of course, the final points that, very little have this kind of exercise is asking librarians. Meaning that in terms of looking for the database for the topics. So remember, even though you are part-time students, okay, of course, for full-time student, you have to or you must use the privilege that you have, which is your librarians. Okay, because librarians is being paid to help to assist users like students. Okay, that is the main task of librarians in our library. So the lesser you ask to the librarians, then the less work of the librarian will have. Good for them lah, kan? Right? But then again, that is the first, the kind of idea on why you're going to explore the topics. When you go to the librarian, or when you want to go for number 3 and number 4, you go to for journals, or you can ask for the database. Okay. Nowadays, very easy database that in your fingerprints is Google Scholar platform. So that is the most important and useful sometimes. Okay, not sometimes, most of the time, or for novice researcher, earlier researcher, to get first insight of your topics. But you need to know how to search. That's the most important thing lah. You need to know how to search. So most of the researcher will use Google Scholar as a basic first platform, unpaid free platform for you to search information about your topics. So rather than sometimes if you go for Google Scholar, other platform like Scopus or like WOS or other platform, Elsevier and so on, maybe you need to subscribe or maybe have a very limited access. So they're on that, but then that is the challenges at the beginning. But then again, for the earlier stage, the Google Scholar is the best platform for you to look for the information. Okay. Other than that, okay, where to look your potential topics? Okay, of course, this is good practice actually. Good practice, and I practice this to all of my former or existing PhD or master level students. You need to review thesis or dissertation. You need to review previous written thesis or dissertation related to your topics. Again, I'm using the term topics, not title. If you look for the same title, you must almost find 0. You need to look or revisit or review previous written thesis or dissertation. And then our library have access to ProQuest. So you can, that's why you need to register, okay, as a former student UTHM. And then during this first semester, you must know or learn how to get access to major database, our library major database, like ProQuest. So you must know. So in order for you to know how, ask librarian, okay, or stop by at the library. Ask the librarian on how to use or get data from ProQuest and so on. Okay. Of course, the next oral defense. Okay, this is some that maybe some have opportunity, but some doesn't have the opportunity to attend any proposal defense or viva voce session. So that is one thing. And then next is the internet, a variety of sources in the internet. For example, like I mentioned, Google Scholar. Okay. Of course, the conference and seminar. If you often attend the seminar or conference, then maybe you can have a picture on that specific topics, okay, or ideas or about the researchable topics. And some might replicate the study. Okay, so replication simply means doing the study again. Okay, not copy, but replicate the study using the different targeted population or sample. For example, study have been conducted in Russia, for example. Then you want to replicate the study and conduct in Malaysia, for example. Another example, study have been conducted in Pontian, Johor, for example, community in Pontian, for example. Then you want to conduct or replicate the study in Kota Baru, Kelantan. So you want to different between northern region and southern region community about the intervention or whatever topics that you're going to study. Also a replication, because you replicate it within the different population, different context. Okay, that is also allowed, right? And then your study may be replicated in several ways. Okay, you might choose or alter part of research design. You might replicate a different graphic area, as I mentioned, your different instrument, okay, or modification or private. There is a justification. So there is a sample of replication that you can do in your research. But whatever it is, okay, you change the location, you change the instrument, you change the research design or whatsoever, again, you need to answer why again. Justify why I need to change, why I need to replicate. That is the most important thing lah. Why I want to replicate this study. Why? You must justify. Okay. Why I choose Kota Baru? Why don't I choose Kuantan, for example? Okay. Because previous study conduct in Pontian. So why I choose Kota Baru? Why? Right. So this big why, ask yourself. Practice make perfect. Okay, so sometimes you just have a coffee with your friends, okay, at the coffee shop, Zeus or whatever stall or coffee shop that you stop by, and then sometimes you need to have this kind of conversation, simple conversation with your friends. What is your study? What is your master PhD study about? Oh, my study is blah 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 in Kuantan. But then your friend, why you choose Kuantan? Then that, even though that is an informal conversation, that is a kind of the practice. You don't have to answer at that point. Okay, if you don't have answer that point, it's okay, because you need to trigger that in your head that, oh, I need to find the answer for this particular. You still have time. But when time come in proposal defense session, or when time come in pro viva voce session, there is no such wait, I don't have the answer. You cannot do that, because at that stage, at that point, examiner or the audience will expect you are expert in this field. You are expert in this research. You must know why you choose, why you select, why you replicate, for example. At that point, it's too late. But at the coffee shop, at the beginning, you discuss with your friend, with your peers, and then you don't have to answer at that point, yes, but then it's trigger you, yeah, I need to find this answer, why. All right. And then this is characteristic of a good topic. Why? What are the criteria of the good topic? Okay. Of course, this is a basic one. Okay, this is very basic characteristic. For example, it should show the relationship between two or more variables. Okay, so one, keyword topics. This is term definition. You must understand what is different between topics and title. Okay, so in topics, like I mentioned early on, I'm using again the same example, online learning. So the topic is about online learning. Okay, so what I want to study about the online learning. So then come to the next term, which is variables, or in Malay, pemboleh ubah. And variables. So you need to identify within the topics what are the variables involved. Believe me, there will be more. Not only 2, not only 3, not only 5. There will be more variables that can be studied in online learning. Okay. For example, motivation is variables. Online learning related to motivation. For example, motivation is the variables. Because online learning is a topic, it's not a variables, it's a topic. Okay, so the variable is motivation. What relates? What are other variables that can be engaged with this online learning? Teaching approach. Teaching approach or pedagogy is considered as variables. Kan? And then when you talk about motivation, there are two lah: student motivation, teacher motivation, and so on. Right? So you can split it up. So that's why I mentioned that when we talk about variables in topic, there are many variables that you can study. This where you start narrowing them. When you identify the variables, okay, then you need to narrow it down. Okay, so you cannot solve all the variables. Then you need to be smart. Here, judgment. You need to have a very strong justification why you choose these variables, not that variables, for example. Okay. And then try to uncover new fact or principles. Okay, this is kind of a new theory. Okay, sometimes you spell it in the topics, then you must show in your research. That is, you need to be careful. And when you mention topics, new knowledge, and so on in the topics, just make sure that it's happened or there is process that you uncover this new topic, for example, okay, in your writing. And then the third is proposed relationship that we were previously unrecognized. This is considered as a gap. Okay. And then challenge existing truth or assumption, provide new insight into little understand phenomena. For example, this try to end that exploratory, as I mentioned earlier on, previous slide, I believe, exploratory, exploration, understand the phenomena, one of the things. It's good research. And then suggest new interpretation of known fact that can be alter people perception of the world around them. So this is kind of, as I mentioned, it's very subjective, but then again, this is just kind of the guide that you might want to look back when you see about the topic. Okay. Again, topic selection. Okay. It must hold your interest for a long time. You must, again, is when you say about interest, the slide tell about interest. In other words, for me, it's about your passion. Okay, your passion. You must have passion, interest, passion. That, believe me, you have interest plus you have passion. That will be your internal motivation for you to finish your journey. Okay, not because the topic is from your supervisor. Then it's not your research. You don't have passion. I do just doing my PhD just to get a scroll. Then, okay, I'm not saying that it's not good, but then again, it can be done. But either you use the fast way, or you use a middle path, or you use the long journey. So you choose. Okay. And then, of course, it must be manageable in size. Okay. Most students begin with a topic that's too large. Remember, you can't do it all. Your goal is to add a small but significant piece to the knowledge base and graduate. That is most keyword. Graduate, most important thing. Yeah, in research, you're not trying to solve everything. As I mentioned earlier, I'm using again the same example, online learning. And then what are the variables involved? There is motivation, there is intervention, there are assessment, and so on. There will be more variables will involve. But then again, you cannot solve all issues related to all the variables that you explore. Then you need to justify which one or which two or which three variables that you manage to study. Okay, still within the same topic, which is online learning, for example. Okay, so the third one, it must have the potential to make an original and significant contribution to knowledge. Okay, Can you find a hole, a gap, missing piece, and so on. Okay, and then it must be doable within your time frame and budget. Of course, again, it's your PhD is 3 years, okay, your master level 1.5 years, so within time frame. So you must have your planning. Okay, a good researcher have their own plan. Okay, and then make sure that plan is doable. Okay, and then make sure that plan you have allocate some budget. Okay, if you being sponsored, okay, so make sure that the budget is within the budget, or if exceed the budget, then make a judgment whether you can afford the extra budget or you need to cut some of the process and so on. So this decision must be made by having a supervision session with your supervisor. Okay, don't be alone in your research. Make friends with your supervisor. Okay, you must be able to collect the data. Of course, you must have respondent. Okay, you must have access to the respondent. Later on, I will share about one more slide about the access. Talking about the access. Okay, you can have a very ideal topic, ideal variable, and so on, but yet at the end, you don't have access to the population or access to the respondent, then you don't have data. Once you don't have data, you don't have research. Once you don't have research, then you don't have your master's or your PhD. So that is the setback. So that is, for me, this point is very critical. It's important that you must be able to collect the data, or in other words, you must have access to your data. Okay, it's okay at the beginning you say that, oh, I don't have the access of my data yet, but I can get the access and I'm pretty much sure that I can get access to my data. That's fine. But again, please don't assume. Okay, but then again, if you saying that, oh, I don't know this, I don't know how hard it is. I don't have contact person. I don't have networking. I don't have member. Then this don't have me is very dangerous. Okay, too dangerous, too risky. Again, even though you set your planning time frame and so on, budget and so on, but if you don't have this point whereby you don't have access to your data, that is problematic. Put a trigger, put a siren that, oh, this is not good. Okay. And then next is has not already been sufficiently researched. Okay, of course, this about the literature gap and so on. And then the most important thing, okay, it should be acceptable to your supervisors and your committee members if you have research committee members. Okay, because some of the supervisors, for example, we provide with your grant, with the topic of your grant. For example, you've been hired by your supervisor as your RA, for example, for your supervisor's grant. Then you need to learn and quickly adapt to understand, because the grant that your supervisor have is only valid for at least 3 years max, or maybe some 2 years or 3 years max. Once the fund is off, then your RA status will be off as well. So need to be careful. So that's why I mentioned early on that you must get close engaged with your supervisor. And the research grant, normally have the research team. This can be as a committee members as well, right? And then this is how you can narrowing down your research topics, okay? As I mentioned earlier on, okay? From online learning, okay? Identify the variables, okay? look for the literature, study the literature on each variables, which variable is have more data access, okay, and easy. This is what you use term easy for you to manage, doable, things like that. You are the one, because it's your research. You are the one. But again, once you make, before you can make the decision, discuss with your supervisor. Okay, I have this variable. Of course, if I'm your supervisor, I will ask you the same question. Why you choose this variable, not that variable? Same thing. So keep on. That's why justification on each decision that you made will make you more understanding your topics. Okay, so that's why at the end of these points, out of these 6 steps, see at the end, consult with your advisor. Who is your advisor? In this case, is your supervisor. Okay, so whether you like it or not, yes, you can have friends, you can have peers, you can go to the library, yes, you can go to Google and so on. But at the end, the consensus from your supervisor is the ultimate goal. When both of you, both sides, you and your supervisor agree, then come up with a plan. Okay, come up with a plan, how to execute. So for me, the best, I believe most of the supervisor agreed with me, the best thing for you to present your proposal, as I mentioned, the sooner the better. But in order for you to present sooner, then you need to prepare yourself wisely, soon enough. Okay? If you plan to present your proposal during your first semester or during your early second semester, then you must work hard for it. To justify, as I mentioned, to justify your topics, to justify your variables, to justify your location, for example. So that's the thing that you need to have answers before you enter the proposal defense session. Okay. Trust me, if you think that the proposal, developing the proposal is challenging, you are not there yet. Okay, because you can ask your seniors or have been graduate from research, you can ask them what is the most important challenges part in social science. We're talking about in social science. The most challenges part is data collection. It's not research proposal. Why I'm saying that is that research proposal, I would say, within control. Within control, meaning that it's your time to read, it's your time to meet your SB, it's your time to write, it's your time to read, it's your time to search. When I'm going to search for this evening, this afternoon, when I'm going to write this morning, and so on. Okay, within your control, within your research control. But when it comes to data collection, it's beyond control. Beyond control means that data collection, you need to reach your respondent. Okay, so it's not your decision. It's your respondent decision whether they are available or not available. Whether you have, again, access, you want to meet him or her or your respondent tomorrow. But then again, someone say, oh, tomorrow I have class, I cannot make it, can we meet next month? You cannot control. All right. So that is what I mean beyond control. So that's why in data collection, if you're saying that you target in 3 months, you can settle your data collection. That is the best time that the best timeline that you can plan. But in reality, sometimes you need more than that. Sometimes you may want to have 6 months of your data collection. Even though within 6 months data collection to social science, you may not reach your people or your respondent 100%. Trust me. Okay. So that's why you will drag. And then once even though 6 months settled, data collection settled, you need to come up with the another stage, which is data analysis, right? Even though you go using statistic or whatsoever, so data analysis also need time. So that's why, I mean, the soonest you settle your proposal, get approved by your supervisor or your committee, get feedback from your peers and so on, and clear understand about the research and so on, the better. Okay? The longer you keep your proposal and then keep it yourself, do not discuss with your SB, then your proposal will go nowhere. Trust me. Okay. As I mentioned, narrowing your down your scope. Okay, and then considering the methodology approach. Okay, then start finalizing your research topic in order for you to come up with your title. Okay, and start refining and articulate your research objective. So this is a step on how you can narrowing down your research topic. Not necessarily in education, but I believe that the 10 steps that been presented in my slide can be used as well in other social science research, because education is one of the social science research. There is no specific, I mean, different terms between social science and education, same level. All right. And then this is kind of different topic. I mean, you can use my simple topics like online learning. So this is just a different another topic. It's related to technology still, okay. But then how you're going to narrow it down your topic into the title. Okay. So this is the assignment. Okay. Slide 11. I will upload this slide into the author. Okay. The second slide for today. Okay. So please refer to the assignment on slide 11. Okay. Which related to the assignment. Okay. And then I want you to, I mean, have the same kind of exercise, okay, for you to from broad into narrowing your topics. Okay. Again, this is not a one-night assignment, I believe. It's not one-night assignment, but for me, once you have the topics, and then from the topics narrow to the title of your research, then it's a process whereby you need to review some of the literature. Okay, you need to look for a thesis, for example, or dissertation, for example. Okay, so that's why it's important for me, for this class, for this session, to have your individual topics and research title. And I want to see how you narrow it down from the topics to your research title by having me or by proving me the journals or the literature that you have been reviewed. Okay, I think that's all for my presentation for this session. Okay.